It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We are streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980, where I am frantically trying to get the graphics package together where I thought it already was. And so the right thing can be on the screen in case someone's like, do I want to take in the show today? Let's see what they're talking about with the graphic on the screen. And instead, I don't have that available until right now, when I now have been able to find the things, Anthony, that I need. Although as I look at your screen / look over at you, you're trying to find the things you need. Basically, we did a bad job of being prepared for the start of the show today. That's a group failure on our part, which we own. That's okay. The rest of the show, I promise, will be better.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. So here's what I want to do on the show today. I want to open up the phones to talk about this Monumental Sports move to Virginia because we didn't get a chance to do that at all yesterday. We had tremendous guests, and I would highly recommend listening to every single interview we did yesterday if you did not get a chance to listen to the whole show. It's all available on YouTube at Team 980 and at Craig Hoffman. It's on the Hoffman Show podcast feed. At this point, I mean, technically you can rewind in the Odyssey app to the end of the show yesterday. It stays up for 24 hours at a time. So we are erasing yesterday as we go today. That is the nature of how 24 hours works. But we had incredible insight on like the social and cultural sides of things, as well as some history from Clinton Yates, who obviously lived in D.C. for 40 years and wrote for the Washington Post and D.C. Covered Metro on top of sports and all that kind of stuff. We had like the true economics of it all with Andy Zimbalist. We had something that I am really proud of that we did because I think it's wound up being one of the more fascinating interviews we did yesterday. Adam Tuss from NBC4 was awesome. He's their transportation reporter, and he talked about how precarious this situation is for D.C. and Alexandria's, Alexandria's traffic and the metro side of this, and why he is very unconvinced that this is a final done deal because he's not 100% sure that some of the logistical hurdles that remain that certainly Monumental Sports is aware of and that the state assembly is aware of in Virginia can actually be overcome. It's going to be difficult and it's going to cost money, and where that money comes from is going to matter because do people downstate in Virginia want to give more money to Northern Virginia? Probably not, at least not without some concessions, but that's politics, baby. So we'll see how that all goes. So there were so many great guests that we had yesterday. Obviously, I've received all kinds of different feedback with my thoughts yesterday to open the show. Some saying thank you for saying the thing that nobody else seems to be saying. Thank you for standing up for us, people that are in D.C., and to a lesser extent, but also certainly in Maryland, who are like, D.C. is the center. D.C., like, everyone can be happy if it comes closer to them, but like if we're trying to be fair, D.C. is the center, and that's where it should be. I got some feedback on that. I got a lot of people that were super angry and telling me to shut up, and Ted Leonsis can do whatever he wants, and that's fine. And I'd like to quickly respond to one point that those people are making that I think is an important thing to say, and then we'll take some calls at 301-230-0980, and we can talk caller to radio host and go through whatever points it is that you, the callers, want to get to. But the idea that this is just capitalism in action belies the fact that there is another way and is also a straight up lie within itself. Ted Leonsis moving his teams to Virginia from D.C. And this would be true if they were in Virginia and he was moving them to D.C. This was true when the Commanders left RFK for Landover. This was true when the Wizards left Baltimore for Landover and Landover for D.C. in the first place. This happens in America because American sports are not capitalism. American sports are oligarchy. To be very clear, oligarchy is when a small group of people controls all of the power, and often with it money. But in this case, we're talking about the power, right? If Stan Kroenke wants to move the Rams, something that people in St. Louis had been rooting for decades, even though they initially stole them from L.A., back to L.A., he's allowed to do that because it's an oligarchy. He has the power. It's not just that he could make more money in L.A. and thus capitalism, because capitalism requires competition. In Europe, in soccer, if let's say I was a bloke living in South London. I don't even know if South London's the best part of London. I'm a bloke living in London, and I want to start a soccer team. And me and my friends start a soccer team, and we go into what's called a non-league league, right? So we're in like the seventh tier of English football, English soccer, right? So we're like playing against other non-professional teams. We're not paying anybody. Like, it's just amateurs out there playing, but we're in a league, and we win the league. But now we go up a league, okay? Now, and this happens in, youth, whatever. You go up a level, down a level with your team, but they're not connected to the professional league because it's youth sports. But like in adult rec sports, imagine if like a Volo, flag football team could win enough that they wind up playing in the NFL. That's how it is in England. Now, the economics are completely different, and now with so much of the foreign wealth money, foreign governments basically owning teams like Newcastle and Manchester City, like the chances that those teams are going to fall out of the Premier League or whatever, like I realize that we're talking in like the most extremes of hypotheticals here, but there are teams that have been out of league football down in the fifth tier that have made it all the way back up to the Premier League. Luton Town right now in the Premiership, in the Premier League, the top league in England, within the last decade and a half, was playing in the fifth tier of English football. If you've watched Welcome to Wrexham, you very much understand this. And what you see is competition truly driving it. Matters on the field, it matters off the field what you do, because in London, there's like 6 Premier League teams. And if Chelsea continues to fall on their face, well, certainly there's an extreme amount of loyalty amongst the fans. If they might just be like, you know what? I can go across the street basically and root for Fulham, and I would rather root for Fulham or Arsenal or Crystal Palace. Why? Because there's legitimately 6 Premier League teams in London. That's not how it works here. There's 32 NFL teams, and the only yes, New York and LA have 2 apiece, but there's not going to be another DC NFL team fighting for your attention, which is why Dan Snyder was able to act like a clown for 25 years with very limited repercussions and then sell the team for $6 billion. It's why Stan Kroenke can take the Rams out of St. Louis and just go to L.A. because all the other owners just care about the money. And it's purely financial, but it's controlled by the small number of people, and thus it is oligarchy, not capitalism. Capitalism requires competition. And there's a whole bunch of other problems in this country that are related to the deregulation when it comes to competition and capitalism, where you have a bunch of monopolies in a bunch of different places. But sports has been like that in America forever. But because of the finances now, teams do this stuff where they make moves based off money, not what's actually best for the fans. Nobody used to move sports teams unless they were legitimately failing. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, we can go make more money somewhere else. Let's move the team. It doesn't happen in the rest of the world. And so, again, is that a little overstated comparing, or a lot overstated, if I were to be comparing Kroenke moving the Rams to and from L.A. and the Capitals and Wizards being moved to and from D.C. to Virginia? Yes, that would be a way over balancing two sides of an equal sign. That's not what I'm doing. I'm just saying the system that allows that to happen is the same one that says, oh, yeah, Leonsis can just move his team to Virginia. And we're all just supposed to accept it. I just reject that premise. I reject the premise that we have to just let the rich guy make more money. And David Aldridge wrote this, I thought, incredible. There was a bunch of great columns, so many great takes on this. David Aldridge in The Athletic was phenomenal. Barry Svrluga in The Washington Post was phenomenal. And one of the things that David said was essentially, forgive me if I would prefer a different outcome than Ted Leonsis dying a little bit more rich. And that's what we're talking about here. I do not have any grudge against Ted Leonsis for wanting to make money. I, in fact, want him to make money because that means he's running a healthy business. And it's eventually going to help him win, which is the thing that most of us care about the most. As long as you cross the line, the threshold of decency in your building, unlike what was happening in Ashburn, that as long as that is met, then winning is the next most important thing. And with that said, I don't begrudge Leonsis for making money. I begrudge him for prioritizing money, for trying to maximize his profit as opposed to balancing making a profit with what is actually best for the fans, for a thing that we share communally, even if he is the one who technically owns it. So yes, if you want to pick apart on semantics, when I say the team belongs to the people, yeah, of course it belongs to Leonsis on the legal paperwork. Spiritually, culturally, emotionally, belongs to everyone who's a DC sports fan. And a rich guy maximizing his richness is, in my opinion, should not be how that asset is treated. This isn't some holding company. This isn't venture capital. This is a sports team. It works because of the fans. It works because of the economy created around it. And so making sure that those people, your customers, the fans, are served should be the first thing that matters, with your profits coming somewhere after. And yes, you can do both. It's just, which do you prioritize? And I think Leonsis is telling us that he is prioritizing the money. Some people won't fault him for that. I do. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. When we get back, your calls, 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980, the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, and always live on the free Odyssey app. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Taking your calls as we stream live on YouTube, too, at the Team 980. 301-230-0980 is the phone number. 301-230-0980 on Ted Leonsis taking his teams to Virginia. There's another thought I want to get to on this in a minute, too, which is, why do we just accept the fact that these two teams have to move together? And by the way, this is backed up potentially. Is there a window open to not do that? With something that was said by Monumental Sports COO and President of Business Operation Jim Van Stone yesterday on Grant and Danny. Jim will join us tomorrow, and I will certainly be asking him about this. But do these two teams need to actually move together? Or could we solve a problem here with a little creative thinking? 301-230-0980 is our number, though, if you would like to call in. Didn't get a chance to talk to you guys on the phones yesterday, so let's do it today, starting with Ricardo. Ricardo, thanks for calling. You are on the Hoffman Show.
All right, Craig, a pleasure to talk to you. Happy holidays to you and your family, and my main man, Anthony Haney, the super producer. But look, you mentioned David Aldridge's column in The Athletic, and he couldn't have said it any better. Really, I encourage anybody to read that column. And as a native Washingtonian, like David Aldridge is, I think he is, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, he is.
He's expressing exactly how we feel as Washingtonians, especially, I hate to put the race issue in it, but it is an element to this, especially black Washingtonians. We got this carpetbagger owner, and then, part of that story that David Aldridge mentioned was Leonsis is, irritated about the guys playing the drums outside and, playing on the buckets. And, that's a D.C. thing. It almost reminds me of the Mute D.C. deal on U Street or Florida Avenue and 7th Street, with the gentrifiers. They don't like that. And, that was a bad look for Leonsis to even to have some irritation about that, man. What you also mentioned as far as why do both teams have to move. Yeah, I wanted to try to bring that up. Looks like you guys are the only show I can get on. I'm seem to be censored on all the other shows. But, why do both teams have to move? But, this is an urban thing a little bit with the basketball. It's a lot more diverse crowd that would enjoy staying downtown, and if the Caps, and I follow the Caps, but not that much really. That's not really my sport really, but I definitely root for them. And when they're winning playoffs, I'll watch, but not so much during the regular season. That's not what I really grew up really watching per se, but, I do follow them and I'm a supporter. But,
for sure.
Why do we have to move both teams? Yeah, why can't we be creative? Leave the Wizards downtown. It's this whole separate crowd. I've been to Caps games and a couple, and let's just be real. I mean, you can count the amount of people on one hand that people of color that go to them games.
Right.
Now, I'm sure the Cap fans will follow down to Alexandria, and that's fine. That's cool. That's
and frankly,
cool.
more of them live there anyway. Like we have the data.
Yeah.
The demographics already suggest that people from Virginia
Right.
are coming into Caps games at a much higher rate compared to the crowd at a Wizards game.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. You know what I mean? Now, I'm a partial season ticket holder, have been for several years now, but I can't see renewing, if they do move to Virginia. I don't even know if I'll really be going to many games. I know it's a little, it's not, that name.
Well, Ricardo, let me ask you this real quick before I let you go, because we do have some other calls. Sure. Is that I don't want to call it pettiness because that makes it sound like it's unwarranted. Or is it like logistics because it's just going to be that much harder for you to go?
Well, it will be a little harder, but, it may sound a little petty, but, I would bring up the DMV statement, and I'm 65 years old, Craig. This DMV thing is relatively new to me, and people my age, when you add in the V, it's just like, okay, that was like a different. I know times have changed, and I need to change with the times, but the Virginia part, the V part of the DM, that's relatively new for us old school Washingtonians, man. But maybe it's a little petty, but
I hear
just
you.
like in David Aldridge's column, he say, okay, we might feel a little uncomfortable coming down there. That was part of his column.
For sure.
If you but thanks, Craig. I really
Yeah,
appreciate you and my
absolutely.
main man, Anthony Haynes. Thank you.
Thanks, Ricardo. I appreciate the call a lot. I think that's a perspective that needs to be heard. I will say this. I am someone who moved to the DMV, and in fact, it was to Reston, Virginia in 2015. That is how long I've been here. I'm never shy about the fact that I'm a transplant. I also am never shy about the fact that I have fallen in love with this city and plan on staying here as long as I possibly can. You never know what's going to happen with work, family, whatever. But if you told me I'm going to live in the D.C. area the rest of my life, I'm pretty psyched about that. I chose Reston because it wasn't that far from Ashburn, and I was hired to cover the football team, and I knew I needed to be in Ashburn. And I prioritized a short commute for myself over other things. But I will distinctly, like the busker / street performer side complaint from Leonsis that has made its way into multiple reports. I think that it does embody some of what we're talking about here, which is to say, like, when I got off the Metro for the first time to go to Capital One Arena and hearing the go-go music and hearing, the street performers and having that feel and that energy walking into a game. And of course, the team was better then too, which tends to help things. And getting off the Metro before playoff games in 2016 with Beal and Wall at the peak of their powers. And we all thought they'd win that series against Boston. Like, I remember going to those games, and the second you get out of that Metro stop at Gallery Place and you hear the go-go music on the buckets outside, to me, that is not a nuisance. That is not an annoyance. That is a feature, not a bug. Like, that is something that is so quintessentially DC that I love. That I was like, oh, this has flavor. This has style. This has personality and character. This is DC. And I don't even hate to say this. I just would remind folks, like, people in DC are not more important than people in Maryland or people in Virginia. But the Maryland and Virginia parts of this matter because of the DC part of it. This is the city. It all starts here, and then it goes out from there. And I realize that populations are shifting and that might change. And that 50 years from now, I mean, I still think DC is going to be the nation's capital. And, like, obviously it's going to be extremely important because of that. But locally, if you told me 50 years from now that, like, Tyson's Corner is seen as a more centrally located and incredibly important thing because of the way populations have shifted and businesses have shifted, and everyone's kind of out there at that epicenter or at that cross-section of 66 in the Beltway, then I wouldn't be stunned. But let's not forget where it started and the fact that this is centralized in the district. And that should matter here on top of the history. And, as Ricardo said, on top of the racial lines. Like, what I'm about to say is a fact. How you interpret it is up to you. But a rich white dude just took something that a lot of black people in D.C. love and moved it to a white area. That is a fact. What you do with that information, whether you think that's relevant or at all, is up to you. But that is true as a fact. I happen to think that's not a good thing. Ricardo, a black man in D.C. who's 65 years old and loves his Wizards and loved his Bullets before that, agrees as well. Someone else might be like, hey, man, times change, demographics change, is what it is, bro. And, if that's your opinion, that's your opinion. But to not mention that and to not talk about all of the different things is, I think, super relevant. And also, like, I'm not trying to simplify it just down to that, to be very clear. I think something that Jim Van Stone said yesterday is pretty fascinating, which is, like, there's nothing DC could do because we want a campus. And if that's the case, like, there is nothing DC can do. Because you can't build a campus here. The land's taken. You can't expand around Capital One Arena in a way that you can build this thing from scratch in Virginia. So there's a lot to talk about. We'll continue talking about it. way over the clock, so take a break, come back, take more of your calls. 301-230-0980. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Not centered on the camera as we stream live on YouTube at the Team 980. Gotta fix that. Can't be all crooked. Can't be over here. Gotta be head on. Again, also, if you miss any part of the show, we put up the highlights on YouTube at Craig Hoffman. We also definitely monitor the comments section on YouTube, which will come in handy today. We didn't never read the comments yesterday. We will do it today, 6 p.m. So looking forward to that. Our NFL tiers, we will talk about at 5:30. Let you know what else is coming up on the show as we go as well. But back to the phones as we go. It's the Ace Law listener line at 301-230-0980. If you're in a wreck, Ace Law helps you get a check. Call 8888 Ace Law. Let's go to Tim. Tim, thanks for calling. You are on the Hoffman Show. Maybe. Anthony, I might need your help because there we go. All right, Tim, now we got you. My computer program froze. My apologies.
Okay. Thank you. Good afternoon. I just want to say that, under the Ted Leonsis regime, as far as the Wizards are concerned, I don't want to go to general manager because these switches were made under Ted Leonsis. But they did not trade Bradley Beal when they should have. Mm-hmm. They gave him a huge contract and no-cut clause for over $500 million, and then Ted Leonsis goes to beg the city for $600 million. And I also feel that he, meaning Ted Leonsis, complains about that mortgage. Well, he should, and I'm sure he is, smart enough to know what he was getting into.
Correct.
When he bought the arena. If you didn't know what the mortgage was, then there's a serious problem.
I think he knows. He just doesn't like it.
No, I know he knows.
Yeah.
But to complain about it, he may have a good point. I understand that. But your eyes are wide open when you bought the arena and the team.
Correct.
And it just seems to me that under his regime, the Wizards have been really not very good at all. You cannot say.
Yeah, that is very correct. Tim, thanks for the call. Just a housekeeping thing on Tim's point. Bradley Beal and his no trade clause contract were not for $500 million, and also you can't take money that's supposed to go to players and spend it on an arena because there's a salary cap and a collective bargaining agreement, and 50% of your basketball-related income has to go to the players. I think it's still 50-50 because those are the bylaws by which the NBA is done. So that's not how any of that remotely works. To Tim's larger point, yes, he has terribly mismanaged the basketball of the franchise, and I think at times, this is an important point, because he was trying to make money. And again, this is hard, it's hard to nail down exactly. But Ted managing the Wizards has been extraordinarily risk-averse, from not firing people to always making sure they're trying to just get a little bit better so they can make the playoffs. And I think a lot of us have thought that's because making the playoffs is very lucrative. And you can convince yourself if you're in the playoffs that you're close, that you're one move away, that you're injury luck away, that you're whatever. What we know about the NBA is that's not remotely the case. That you have to take big risks, big swings. You have to relentlessly pursue star players and the best 5 players on the planet level star players, not John Wall, Bradley Beal star level players. 2 guys that could have helped you win a title if they had someone better than them there. And maybe there was a time that it felt like Wall was going to approach that, but he clearly never was there, and they never found a way to be a destination. And I think this is a part of it too. I'm curious if this is helpful in the long term because they feel like they can recruit players to play at this new arena with the new practice facility and the new everything better than they can in D.C. But I think the problem for D.C. is not facilities, is not any of that. There's no history of winning here. The team stinks now, and it's been mediocre for most of the last 40 years, if not bad. It's never been good. They've never made it past the second round since the 90s, and very rarely before then. You've got to either be New York, LA, Miami, or have the history of a place like Boston. I guess Chicago fits this bill as well. If you want free agents to be there and to stay there when you draft them. And between not drafting well enough and not being remotely attractive to free agents, both because you don't have the roster and you don't have the history, then, what do you expect? And by the way, that also impacts the economics, because if this team was good, more people would have been showing up, and this would be a very different discussion. And I will say this, too, about the Capitals, not to leave them out of this. A lot of people are like, well, he's managed the Caps well. Has he, or did he have Alex Ovechkin? And obviously, I think he's managed the Caps better than the Wizards, and he's one of the things that I think Leonsis should be commended for is his loyalty. I think I've said this before. I don't know that Leonsis' loyalty has always served him in terms of winning hockey or basketball games, but I think it's an admirable trait as a human being. He honors contracts. He does not push to fire people in the way that emotionally, reactively, a lot of other owners do. And I genuinely admire that about him, that he has patience. However, he has been extremely loyal to a core that is now aged out, and we'll see, obviously, what happens with Ovechkin. He'll be a Capital for life, as he should be, but at what cost in terms of winning, a la Kobe with the Lakers at the end. Can they rebuild around him? And, Ovi's still scoring goals at a great clip, so that seems relevant as well. But when you have an all-time great player and you had a number one seed caliber team every year, I'd probably guess a lot of hardcore Caps fans are like, I can't believe we only have one Stanley Cup. And I know hockey playoffs are wild to get hot goaltenders and the whole deal, but like when you were good for great for a decade and a half and you come out with one, it's kind of disappointing. So, that seems relevant too along the way. Let's go to Jamie. Jamie, thanks for calling. You are on the Hoffman Show. Jamie.
Yeah, I'm here. Am I supposed to turn my radio down in the car?
Yes, please. And then you're live on the air. So let's get it moving.
Okay. All right. Talk on the phone here. Well, my feeling is there's so many different layers to all this. I mean, I go way back. I remember back in the days when the teams were out at Largo, and
Sure.
they struggled to have any attendance, and they weren't very good. Poland went to PG County, and he said he listed like 8 reasons how he could stay there because he didn't want to move out of the area. He had loyalty to the area, and they had to give him tax incentives. And then when he came downtown to the Chinatown area, back in those days, people wouldn't go to Chinatown. And, when he put the arena there, it completely turned it around. And then I think the city gave him some great tax incentives. So it was a good deal for both of them. But I'm not happy. I don't like the way Leonsis is doing this and taking the team to Virginia. But the city has to take a little responsibility, too, I think. We have a business on Connecticut Avenue. You walk up and down the city, there's so many empty storefronts there. I have friends, clients that had businesses on 8th Street, Northeast. They had to close their restaurants down because the crime was so bad.
Mm-hmm.
And, the city is kind of, after the fact, is kind of coming forward and saying that, maybe we'll do more, maybe we'll kick in more. But D.C. generally is not a business-friendly city. So, on one hand, I think Leonsis is abandoning the city and, taking his marbles and going over to Virginia. But on the other hand, D.C. has to take some of that responsibility, too.
Jim, you're very correct on a lot of that, and I appreciate the call. And that is a topic that I want to explore more today. And one of the Washington Post reporters who covers the district and the government in D.C. locally is going to join us at 5 o'clock to do just that. What I would simply say quickly, though, and we can take some more calls, and I'm going to think about this a little bit more during the break in terms of a larger point, and I'll expand on it next, along with some more of the calls, is what is happening in D.C. is not unique to D.C. There are closed storefronts in every major city in America, especially in business districts, because we just went through a cataclysmic international event in COVID-19. The pandemic changed everything, and I do not think that, intellectually, societally, we have done a good job of realizing that. It's not Europe after World War II, where they had to rebuild entire. If you go to certain parts of certain countries in Europe, it's like, wow, all these buildings are so new. It's like, yeah, because they got bombed to smithereens. And we're not talking about a war destroying a country, but somewhere below that, in terms of cataclysmic, seismic shifts, we lost how many people, human lives just disappeared over the course of that 2020, 2021 timeframe. And businesses changed because we realized with modern technology, we could operate more efficiently in a lot of ways from home. And one of the biggest entities that did that is the federal government. They were forced to operate from home and went, wait, we can do this. So why would we spend all this money on office space? Now, I will say this. If you want to fix D.C., if you're out there listening and you used to work in D.C. and now you work from home, you want to play a part in fixing D.C., come back to work. I wouldn't want to. I don't think that's your individual responsibility, but that would be the easiest way to do it. Metro ridership is cut in half. Take the Metro, go to work. Buy a sandwich at your local lunch shop. That would fix it. I don't think that's a good plan because I think there's a lot of other impacts. A lot of that money now, your local lunch shop in your neighborhood might get your lunch money instead. I don't think that's a bad thing. It's a bad thing for D.C. It's a bad thing for the lunch shop on F Street. But if you live off of Sunrise Valley in Reston, maybe that restaurant's doing better because more people are working from their suburban homes. And they Uber Eats, and that's good. The delivery drivers have a little bit more to do. It's a shifting economy, but it's so new that we don't know how to handle it yet. We don't know what the next plan is, which is why this is so fascinating. Like the model that Capital One was built off of is the Camden Yards model. 1992, Larry Lucchino, and this is, I'm saying this with a great mastery because I went to broadcast school and learned how to speak with mastery. But this is something that I'd always kind of heard about but didn't fully understand until researching this yesterday. So I'm being fully transparent with you, the audience. But Larry Lucchino was the president of the Baltimore Orioles, had this idea essentially that if he built a ballpark in a business district and then encouraged bars and restaurants to build up around it, people would get off of work, go to the bars and restaurants, and then go to the game. And he was dead right. And thus, for the next 25 years, that's what happened. People built arenas in business districts, and that model worked. But technology changed, the pandemic changed everything, and we live in a different world now. And what we have to, what Leonsis is trying to figure out, and what we're all trying to figure out, is what's the new model? Is it suburban? Is it still urban, but maybe it's in a more residential area? And the people that live there just kind of understand that's part of the deal? This is new territory. And for that, I am willing to have some level of empathy and sympathy and whatever as Leonsis makes this move and is kind of at the front edge of this in a new world. At the same time, the cultural element doesn't change. Culturally, you're still pulling the Wizards out of D.C. and the Caps, but culturally it matters more on the basketball side of it. You're pulling basketball out of a basketball city. And that to me is higher on my priority list than it is for a lot of other people. We'll wrap up all this, one or two more calls next before we're joined by someone who covers the D.C. government and can talk about, did they truly fumble the bag here? And what are they doing to try to regain as much of it as they can? We'll talk to our expert coming up at 5 o'clock. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app. The Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Again, we'll talk to someone who covers D.C. government on what happened behind the scenes, D.C. City Council, Mayor Bowser's office, to allow the Wizards and Caps to likely leave the district. Groundbreaking in Potomac Yards 2025. Planned opening 2028. One or two more calls, though, real quick. 301-230-0980. Let's go to AP. AP, thanks for calling. You are on the Hoffman Show.
Hey, Craig. How you doing?
Good, man.
All right. Shout out to my man, Amp. But, I'm going to go off script real quick, and I'm gonna try to keep it real quick because I know you have your time constraints. But, I'm a graduate of D.C. Public Schools, and as you already know, I'm an Army veteran of 18 years. So, I've grown up in this area. I'm a new father now. My son will be one in a couple of days now. And, I frequent Instagram. That's like my new CNN or MSNBC or what have you when it comes to news and current events going on in the area. And, it's very disheartening just seeing what's going on in my city. And, I'm also a federal police officer in the civilian world, on the civilian sector of federal government. Mm-hmm. And, I always, as I was aspiring to get in that line of work, I always said to myself, at first I wanted to give back to my city. I wanted to work for MPD and, because I felt like, being the young person that I am, I could give back to the community. I could try to touch bases with the youth that I could somewhat relate to, seeing as I'm close in age. And, with all the things going on in the city and just how things have changed, especially with the pandemic, it's like we, the community members, we, the people, we have to address the neighborhood first. We have to address our youth first. I've noticed there are children raising children, and thus is why we have what we have when we have all these carjackings and burglaries and things of that nature going on.
Right.
And it's like we, the people, have to put our arms around the youth and touch bases with the youth and reach them before we can ask the community leaders to do something for us. Because we have the close eye to the youth and the crime and the things that are going on in our city. And if we can't reach our youth, then once the youth is unreachable, they're lost. And thus we're begging the community members and the leaders, oh, you need to do this, you need to do that. Well, what are we going to do?
Well, AP, that's...
we can get mad...
I'll let you wrap up real quick. Yeah. I am up against the clock, so hit me with your last thought real quick.
Yes. Well, I was just going to say, before we get mad about Ted Leonsis leaving and the mayor not keeping him there and what have you, we got to really reach the deep-rooted issue in all this, and it's us. We have to take control of our city, and when we find things wrong, we have to address it. We got to police up ourselves before we can ask the leaders to police our neighborhoods. And that's all I got.
AP, thanks for the call. I could do many hours on a million things that AP just touched on. As many of you know, I'm very interested in politics, and the reason I said this yesterday, the reason I'm interested in politics is not because I like horse races. If I wanted a horse race or a scoreboard, I'd watch sports. I hate how political coverage is often about the politicians and not the policies and the things that people do as leaders for communities all across the country. The balancing of the rural and the urban and the suburban and, all these things. But I would say this, we all have an individual responsibility, of course, but leaders lead. And this is why I was so, touched is not really the word I'm looking for, but I'm running out of time, and that's what I'm going to use. I was so touched by the line in David Aldridge's column that talked about how Leonsis leaving feels like an abandonment. And in order for the community to rally around itself, to lift up and help solve some of the problems that AP just touched on, it'd be nice if you felt like you had allies in leadership. And in a time, because of the pandemic, where a bunch of problems were exacerbated and even more were created around education, around poverty, around all of these things, it would have been really nice for Leonsis to go, you want to know what? This isn't good right now. We do have issues in this city that we need to fix, but I'm going to stay here and fix them. And to Ted's, to fairness, I think he is going to claim that he is going to keep Capital One Arena open and put more events there and help revitalize the Chinatown Penn Quarter neighborhood. And he's going to be a part of the solution. I just happen to think that moving the Wizards and the Capitals, but specifically the Wizards, out of that neighborhood is an emotional blow that is going to do a lot of damage that some amount of dollars that he's going to put towards it is not going to be able to fix. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. So from the D.C. side, the government, what happened so that we get here and where do they go from here? Talk to an expert next on the Team 980. Football math coming at the bottom of the hour. How many teams are prime contenders? Our NFL tiers. We do them weekly Thursday at 5:30. Typically Wednesdays at 5:30. We do never read the comments, but that got shifted because of how we just handled the show with the breaking news and everything yesterday. That'll be at 6 o'clock today. But obviously, the thing we talked about yesterday is still our lead story today. Monumental moving their teams to Virginia, likely anyway. But what about it from the D.C. side of it? Let's talk about it with an expert. It's time for Not My Beat.
Today's top story from the perspective of someone who's there.
You are looking live.
This just in.
Not My Beat.
Michael Bryce Sadler covers D.C. government and politics for the Washington Post. He joins us now. Michael, thank you, sir. How are you doing this afternoon?
Sure, Craig. I'm doing all right. It's been a busy couple of days, I'll say that much.
Yeah, for sure. So there is so much to talk about here from the D.C. side of it. And I guess like the baseline question that I feel like most people in the audience want to know is essentially, did D.C. fumble the bag here? Like they clearly were able to conjure up some kind of offer with $500 million, seemingly at the last second. Some of your reporting with your colleague Megan Flynn talks about the timeline of that kind of extended a few days backwards. But also Jim Van Stone, the COO of Monumental, said yesterday on Grant and Danny that Virginia just provided something D.C. couldn't. They provided the opportunity to build this campus. So as you've reported on this, where do you kind of come down on how realistic it was for D.C. to keep these teams in the first place?
Well, I mean, I think it's one of those things where it could be a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B, right? So I think when you look at what Virginia was offered and what Ted Leonsis himself talked about at that news conference, I think it was yesterday. Time has escaped me. But
it indeed was somehow just yesterday.
He came out and said, look, we have a chance to build from the ground up here, a blank slate, if you will. And that's not really possible with the current setup in D.C. And that's not even talking about the dollar amount, right? Like the Commonwealth, it would cost them $1.6 billion. DC's in the conversation for $500 billion. So there's just more money at play, more space at play. But I think the other side of this conversation is what we've been hearing a lot from people privately who are kind of privy to these conversations is, well, was DC moving urgently enough over the summer when Monumental had expressed this interest in potentially going to Virginia or let the city know it was entertaining such a decision? Was there enough of an emphasis on trying to make sure that didn't happen, considering when the offer was ultimately presented, considering how kind of haphazard that all seemed? It's lended itself to that type of conversation of, well, did DC move with enough urgency on this?
And you even have other D.C. City Council members in your story saying, like, we didn't know about this. Phil Mendelson, the chair, did, obviously. Mayor Bowser did. But is that something that is typical and I would assume problematic in the D.C. city government, that there is poor communication, that people aren't looped in who need to be or would like to be and have a right to be? Is this something that is emblematic, or is this something that is kind of unique to this issue?
That's a good question. I mean, I think it depends on the issue, but there has been a criticism over the years and the time I've covered this beat on how effectively the council and the mayor are working together, how well they're communicating with one another, especially on issues like public safety, which I'm sure you're aware of. But this isn't something completely novel or new. There have been strained relationships in the past between the council and the mayor's office. And in this case, the council doesn't have the authority to make the type of offer the mayor has made. It does take them both working together, like the mayor proposes it and then the council passes it. So they've come out to say we're in lockstep behind this proposal now, but I think the bigger question is what happened in the months leading up to this proposal being put on the table over the past few days.
Michael Bryce Sadler, who is a Washington Post reporter covering the D.C. government and politics for the Metro Desk, is with us here on the Hoffman Show. So you mentioned the public safety side of this, and there is obviously been an increase in crime in D.C., whether it is as much as the narrative, depending on who you ask, everyone's got a different narrative, different perspective. Right. That whether it matches that is I think up for debate. So Michael, as someone who covers this, can you give us a realistic picture of the crime situation in D.C., how much that potentially played a role here, and where that is kind of, I would say, relative to the rest of the country, where I think a lot of other big cities and frankly a lot of other rural and suburban areas are also seeing increases in crime post-pandemic for a litany of reasons.
Right. Well, I mean, DC's problems, I think you stated them pretty fairly. They're acute. And even some of those other big cities that saw increases during the pandemic have seen reductions that DC has not experienced itself. So while the headlines, I think, can be a bit sensational, and how people feel about it, again, will depend on who you ask, I would say the general tenor among lawmakers here, among top city leaders, among residents, is that things are not in a good place and that a lot of people do not feel safe. So that's been the top priority for the mayor, for the council, is trying to figure out how can we turn this around through legislation, through changes in policy, through tweaks in procedure to have these stats go in a different direction. Now, as it pertains to the stadium, you know, there's been reporting that we've done that Ted Leonsis himself has had some concerns about activity outside the arena. But I think if you go out, you go to a Wizards game, you go to a Capitals game or a concert, you see tons of people out by Capital One Arena. I don't live far away from the arena. So while there are concerns about crime, I don't think it's prevented anyone from going downtown to see a game, right? And I think that's what makes this all the more devastating for residents. It's not a situation where nobody wanted to go downtown to the arena. Maybe if you are a huge Wizards fan, you haven't had a lot to cheer about lately, but outside of that, the crime concerns, it's really case by case depending on who you ask and what their experience has been personally. But this year has felt different compared to others.
Oh, Michael, you should see the YouTube comments, how many people will not come downtown and how many of them are in my YouTube comments. It's amazing. Really, really amazing. Michael Bryce Sadler's with us, DC government reporter here on the Hoffman Show. Of course, Michael writing for the Washington Post. So one of the things that I've kind of been talking about the last, I can't believe, again, it's only been 48 hours or 36 hours since this news broke, is the opportunity that exists for DC now to reimagine that area. What are some of the proposals to try to make the Penn Quarter area into something vibrant and viable again, considering we are in a new era, a new economy where people aren't going to go to work like they did prior to 2020?
Right. Well, this has been a top concern for the city all year, before the Wizards and Capitals leaving was even really part of the common conversation as it pertains to downtown and the area around Chinatown. The city's finances are struggling in large part because of how downtown changed with the pandemic. Workers who are working more remotely, less visitors downtown overall. Now the city has seen some increases in people staying at hotels in terms of tourism. That has increased gradually. And I think anecdotally, if you look around at who's commuting, you're seeing improvement. So the focus for the city now, and they have a downtown action plan that was supposed to come this fall and is actually going to now be unveiled next year, is figuring out how they can attract new people downtown, residents, more visitors, other types of things besides office spaces, and bringing workers in who I think we all know the remote work situation is probably here to stay for a lot of companies who are moving out of the big buildings they lease downtown and trying to save money because of that. So how do you repurpose those buildings? How do you bring new visitors downtown, whether that's using empty retail spaces for art exhibits? That's something that's been discussed. Public performances like concerts to make use of old spaces. Everything's on the table right now for the city.
One of the big areas that is definitely needed in the city is affordable housing. And it seems like, I mean, look, we're in Navy Yard and they built Nats Park and it's like, wow, everything's great. Nats Park or Navy Yard used to be a hellhole and now look at it. I'm like, yeah, look at all the luxury apartments that people can buy. There's very little affordable housing. Do you think that some of that area could turn into that? And also, how does, 82 nights plus playoffs a year worth of games not being there change the prospects for that area?
Well, to the second point you made, I mean, that is going to have to be something the city figures out. If, for example, the Mystics are relocated. Obviously, Georgetown might continue to play there. That's still an ongoing conversation from what I understand, but that would be a huge change that city leaders would need to figure out how to replicate that. You really can't without those teams there. So it's a matter of, again, getting creative once again. And in terms of affordable housing in general, that has been, I think, the calling card for a lot of housing advocates and others who care about housing and housing people who have been priced out of the city, is use this opportunity to turn some of these older buildings downtown into apartments, into affordable housing. The challenge is that's a lot easier said than done. It sounds great on paper, but actually reconfiguring the plumbing, the windows, how these office buildings are set up into an apartment is expensive. So the city has tried to create some incentives for developers to actually undergo those types of renovations and changes, but whether or not all of that housing is going to be affordable remains to be seen. Certainly, some lawmakers on the DC Council have sought to siphon off some of the housing that's maybe set to be built to make sure that it's some level of affordability. But with the economy the way it is, affordable really is like a quotation mark because even what's labeled affordable housing might not be able to house the poorest people in the city.
Right. Michael Bryce Sadler is with us, D.C. government and politics reporter for the Washington Post. On the budget side of this, Michael, the $500 million that they came up with, because you mentioned how strapped the city is financially right now, and cities don't operate at losses in the way that like the federal government does. There's no such thing as a deficit in a city budget for those listening that might not understand that or know that. The idea that you can just come up with $500 million and be like, oh, we have it, Ted, please stay. Is that now $500 million that can go to education, to housing, to other things? Or was the way that money was accounted for requiring some of the revenue that these teams were bringing, and thus that money either went to Ted Leonsis or is not going to exist?
So part of the reason that DC was able to present this offer now, at least as the mayor explained, is that because of the shifting financial in the city, which again, some of the finances are looking better than what was predicted earlier this year, the city was able to refinance some of its debt, which creates an avenue to make that kind of offer. Now that would be borrowing, so it's not a situation where there's just money suddenly available. The emphasis and why the full council is behind this is because the arena is such an economic engine that when it comes to some of the things you mentioned, like social services, if there's no teams downtown, if there's no arena, if that downtown activity is not there, then that hampers the city's ability even further to provide those services moving forward. So it's really imperative to get downtown on track economically so that the city can keep providing the housing, the social services that it has, with demand as high as it's ever been for things like rent relief and support along those lines.
So last thing for you, Michael. Leonsis owns the building. The city owns the land. Leonsis hates his lease, and it's coming up relatively soon. What are the chances that the city, whether it's the city or Leonsis' side of it, just go like, no, we're done here? Because they're saying all the right things right now on the Monumental side. We want to keep going. There's concerts that we've had to turn down that we can fill Capital One Arena with, all this stuff. But what are the chances that by the time, whether it's they break ground in 2025 on Potomac Yards or 2027 when these teams leave, that's the end of the relationship between Leonsis, Monumental, and Capital One Arena, and that space all of a sudden is vacant and available to whatever extent it would be available for whether it's demolition in something that's not an arena or for someone else to come in and try something else with that spot in an arena-sized and shaped building.
Right. I mean, I think based on everything Ted has said so far, city lawmakers and the mayor are operating with the impression that that's not the situation right now. Now, do I think that privately there are probably some discussions about, well, what does that future look like if Leonsis makes that decision? That's one thing, maybe, but for right now, there's an understanding that there is still a commitment to operating the arena. Granted, it would look a lot different with those two teams in play, and I think the future is a huge question. I don't know what the relationship looks like, frankly, after this move Leonsis has made and how negotiations will go. Obviously, DC doesn't think it's out of the picture in terms of retaining those teams, but Virginia has a ton of momentum. So right now the focus is, well, here's our best and final offer the city has offered Ted Leonsis, and we'll see where it goes from there.
We will all watch with bated breath, and you'll probably watch sooner, if you will, than the rest of us, which means we're going to be reading your reporting. Michael Bryce Sadler, D.C. government and politics reporter for the Washington Post as part of their Metro section. Thanks so much for your time here on the radio, Michael, and great work, and I'm sure we'll talk to you again down the line as this story continues to develop.
I'm sure. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Again, that's Michael Bryce Sadler. He and Megan Flynn wrote a great piece that's worth your time in the Post on all of this. There is so much. God, it feels like drinking from a fire hose because there's so many different angles to this. One thing that I will say on the affordable housing side of it and these buildings, I know this isn't necessarily a sports topic, but it's all related. And this is personal to me. This might surprise people. Like come from middle-class parents, white dude seemingly has a great job, and this job is great in a bunch of different ways, but like they don't pay you a lot when you get started in radio. A radio salary is nothing to write home about. Certainly nothing to send a check home about. Sure, if you can be Stephen A. Smith or Mike Greenberg, this industry pays you really freaking great. Or if you're frankly, if you're, say, a morning show that's been on for 27 years, like you build up enough sponsors and stuff over time, and you're doing all right. But as someone who started in this industry, as it started to change drastically in the early 2010s, and the digital era came, and radio has been on a journey, as is newspapers, and frankly television. Like, look what happened with all these regional sports networks. I will just stop meandering and tell you that when I worked in Dallas, I was making, my salary was $25,000 a year. 25. When I moved here, it more than doubled simply because 980 used to be a union shop. And the minimum that they were allowed to pay me was more than double what I was making in Dallas. I supplemented my income in Dallas by doing more shifts and getting paid an hourly rate on top of my salary for weekend shows and extra things. So, yeah, it wasn't great. But because of that, I actually qualified for a rental assistance program in the city. And so I used to live, because I needed to live outside of the city to afford to be able to live in a place of my own. I used to live in Valley Ranch. It's ironic because I didn't cover the Cowboys like I wound up covering the Commanders. And even though the facility was a mile from my apartment. But then I wanted to be closer because the station I was working for was originally owned by Disney, like big ESPN, and got leased essentially to another company whose office was downtown. And so in moving to downtown Dallas to be closer, I was able to live in what was a pretty nice apartment building thanks to a rental assistance program because I was getting paid nothing. And I think when we talk about like the types of apartments and the types of things that can be built in DC, some creativity around that should be in play. Like, it's not just about building super basic nothing apartments so that lower income salaries can make you be able to live there. It's a combination of both. Like, let's give people a nice place to live, but help them afford it. Like, there are more creative ways to go about this, and it's going to be on real estate developers. It's going to be on the city. It's going to be on a lot of different people to figure out the best solutions, and those people are way, way smarter than me. But it's interesting hearing someone like Michael, who covers this day in, day out, talk about the difficulties of, yeah, this is expensive, which is why developers want to make these things into luxury apartments, because they can make more money off of it, and they can also recoup their investment faster, because turning an office space into an apartment where you go from having like one bathroom on every floor to, 25 to 60 to whatever number of apartments that all need one or more bathrooms in them, and showers and, laundry facilities and all of those things, whether they're on a floor or each individual unit. These are complicated, expensive things. And by the way, You're dealing with union shops, which is fine by me, but it costs more money because the standards are higher. And so there's just a lot of stuff that goes into this, and it's extraordinarily complicated. But it's going to take a lot of investment and reimagination. And now I just wonder if I'm the city, how I treat that Penn Quarter neighborhood. Do I trying to revitalize businesses and change the kinds of businesses that are there? Or am I fully embracing a more residential area? And what happens at Capital One Arena is going to probably influence that, because it's going to influence how likely it is that people actually want to live there in a place where there is or is not concerts, or there are or not concerts and basketball games and monster truck events and, events in conjunction with the convention center, which is something that Monumental has mentioned. So it's all intertwined. It's all intersectional. It's all very complicated. And a lot of it goes well outside the bounds of sports. Very inside the bounds of sports, NFL tier rankings. That is where we go next. It's the Hoffman Show on a Thursday here on the Team 980, streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980, and always live on the free Odyssey app. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. We will dive into the comments section coming up at 6 o'clock. Continue talking about, obviously, the big news of yesterday/today, the move for Monumental Sports to Virginia, which is not final, but very likely the framework of the deal in place. We take our first detour in a couple days, though, now to rank the NFL's 32 football teams. We do this each and every week. Our NFL tiers. Anthony, did you actually just get ahead of the cold? Did you feel it starting to get colder and go to change the thermostat before it got freezing?
Yes, I did.
Hey!
Yeah. I felt the breeze, man. I was like, whoa, hold on now.
I started to notice it a little bit, but it wasn't like bad. There wasn't one of those where I go, Anthony.
Yeah.
Please go. We hadn't gotten there yet.
Yeah.
Just a little more proactive than usual. I like it. You're starting to adjust to how we like it in here.
Yes, sir.
Which is weird that I say we, but like really how I like it. But you also always agree with me. That's the thing. Sometimes you're just a little bit behind.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's time for our NFL tiers. This is getting harder by the week, although some of it feels easy. Prime contenders. I mean, if we're doing it based off recent form, this list gets real small real fast.
Who would you rank as the best team? We've never really ranked the prime contenders.
Well, that's antithetical to the segment. The point of the segment is that you don't actually, like, it is more accurate to clump teams together than it is to rank them 1 through 32.
Oh, no, I wasn't trying to rank those teams.
But you're saying who would be your favorite today?
Yeah, like who would we have? 1, 2, 3, 4. We have 6 teams in our prime contenders. If you had to rank them, how would you rank? That's all I was asking.
I will at least entertain your game for one team.
Okay.
And my one team is the team that I picked to win the Super Bowl before the season. That is the San Francisco 49ers.
Yeah.
To me, they are the best team in the league. I think the Ravens are really good. I think the Cowboys are playing excellent. And frankly, I think all these teams in here, although the Dolphins were starting to have to potentially have some conversations, I think all the teams in here legitimately could win the Super Bowl, are real threats to win their conference, and that's the definition that we put on this category. They are prime contenders. Of course, some are going to be more prime than others, and I think the San Francisco 49ers are the most prime, but I still think we have this group correct.
I would agree. The 49ers are definitely the best team in football. I thought it was the Ravens, but they just allowed Matthew Stafford and the Rams to go out there and hang 30 on them. So I don't know. I got to reconsider that defense a little bit because the Rams defense is not that of the 49ers. So I don't know how it will fare.
They are maybe the best offense in football, and they are one of the best defenses in football.
Yeah.
Like, good formula. It's
all
like,
the way around.
You know, when you want to pick an NBA title team, go look at the team, go find the team that's got the top 5 offense and the top 5 defense, and that's probably your eventual NBA champion. That's kind of how that works. And the NFL is a little bit more random because of the nature of the playoffs. One game and you're done. But, like, what more do you want from a team than we can run it, we can throw it, we can stop the run, we can stop the pass. Sometimes our kicker that we way overdrafted, because why did we draft a kicker? We'll miss a kick or two. But, like, generally speaking, as long as we're healthy, we'll murder you.
I forgot all about that. They did lose to the Browns because he missed a kick.
Yeah.
A chip shot.
Yeah, not great. But since they've been healthy, like, is Debo healthy? Is Trent healthy? Is CMC healthy? Is Purdy healthy? Those 4 are healthy on offense, and Warner is healthy on defense.
It's curtains.
I think they're the favorite. If they lose one of those guys, it's a blow. If they lose Warner, that would be terrible. But not cataclysmic. Like, Dre Greenlaw's great. Tafunga's great. Like, they've got good defensive line. Obviously, Bosa's incredible. They've got depth with guys like Chase, who are super wild card type of players. They think you need on every championship team. So, yeah, I would say San Francisco's easily the favorite. I think the question we have to ask is Chiefs and Eagles. They've lost 2 games in a row each. I told this stat during this segment last week. Since the Kelsey brothers started New Heights, their podcast, they had never lost in the same week until last week. They've now lost 2 weeks in a row.
Wow.
Of course, the Chiefs, another close one with the Kelsey throwback to Kadarius Toney, called off due to the offensive offsides. The Eagles have been crushed 2 straight weeks, but they've been crushed by other teams in this category. And so I still have faith in these teams. I think they'll figure it out. It would not surprise me if they were in the Super Bowl again. And so I think they belong. Would I pick either of them, I think, at this point? Kansas City more than Philly, but I think they both belong.
I agree. I mean, the Eagles, again, they're in a tough stretch of their season. They're going against literally everybody in the prime contender section. Well, aside from the Bills, I think. But
the Bills are like the best puncher's chance team. Because they like the Bills define puncher's chance because if Allen goes nuts on a given day, they're super hard to beat. It's just you can't rely on that every week.
Yep.
And they played up that week to Philly.
Yeah, so I just feel as though, I mean, I wouldn't panic. A lot of people are like panicking, but these are some, they lost to some really good teams. The end of their season gets really easier. I think they'll be able to, rest a couple of their guys towards the end of the season. I would hope that they will want to go out there and try to get, the number 1 seed in the NFC, but it's getting tougher as they, these losses start to pile up. But their schedule does get easier, so I'm not really worried about them.
They also started 10-1. Like, they built themselves some cushion.
Exactly.
So are they still going to finish with, 3 to 5 losses? Probably, which is still an amazing season. You finish 12-5, that's good enough to be a legitimate 1 seed most years. Baltimore, they won. It was a little uglier, but I think the Rams are good. We'll talk about them in a second.
Yep.
Baltimore, no issues. Cowboys prove they belong. In this, man, they're scary good right now. I think it was something Jason Kelsey said on New Heights that was interesting. He said they played fast, they played with energy, and that's something that if the Cowboys can come back and win this division and get home games throughout the playoffs, that is a different team at home because of the speed of that turf. Collinsworth mentioned it on the broadcast too of the Sunday Nighter against Philly. They get on that turf down there in Dallas and they're playing at full speed. It's a different team than outdoors in grass and slop and whatever conditions you might see in January in San Francisco or outdoors in Philadelphia. So that's something to watch for sure. And then you have Miami, who is kind of Dolphins, or is kind of Cowboys East. Super talented, a lot of pizzazz, a lot of star power, a lot of offensive points put up. Haven't actually beaten anybody good. The best win on their schedule is Denver. In part because it was historic, but also that was way before Denver got rolling. That was at the nadir of Denver's terribleness. So does Miami belong in prime contenders, or do they belong one notch down in puncher's chance?
My thing is, yes, they lost to the Titans. Terrible loss. But if they don't have Tyreek Hill,
yeah,
they can't really compete with anybody, to be honest. Their entire offense revolves around him. And when he went out against the Titans, yeah, he did come in here and there, but his ankle was clearly killing him. So they're going to be an interesting team to watch just because offensively, a lot of their explosive plays are built around him. The run game, struggled a little bit against the Titans. So I don't really know what to make of the Dolphins. I'm willing to leave them here just because they still have explosive players. And Tua's, he's been phenomenal all season.
Yeah.
But
I also think their defense isn't bad. And I think that's a relevant plot point.
They had a terrible outing against the Titans, though.
Well, did they, or did they have a bad 2 minutes? Because they were up 14 with less than 3 minutes to go.
Yeah.
In a game that they lost 28-27. So they were up 27-14. If they just land the plane and they win 27-21 even, that's not a bad day at the office. So I think like Christian Wilkins is really good. Ramsey's really good.
Yep.
And I'm also willing to
Chubb.
give McDaniel another week. Yeah, Chubb's great. Like McDaniel, it's one thing to adjust to losing a player like Tyreek mid-game, where all of a sudden you've planned all week to have him and your game plan goes out the window and you have to kind of reconfigure it on the fly, versus, hey, our guy's wounded or our guy's unavailable. How do we plan without him? So this, to me, this is the week to test for Miami. I don't even remember who they're playing. But if they win and they look like themselves, then they stay. If they drop another one and they don't look potent, then I think they might have to go down a level. Because we're also fairly or unfairly, probably a little bit unfairly, going to judge them based off the end of last year, where they dumped all over December. They didn't win a game. So I guess we'll reconvene next Thursday and discuss. Okay, there's some interesting results in puncher's chance and in the interesting but not quite good enough categories.
Yep.
No chance is still no chance. So we will wrap up our NFL tiers next. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app. Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We will get back to the Monumental story in just a little bit. We'll get to Never Read the Comments, which will include more coverage of the Monumental story and some Commanders' thoughts coming up at 6 o'clock. Right now, though, we continue with our NFL tiers on a Thursday, and we will wrap those up here in the next few minutes. Starting with our second tier, if you will, prime contenders. Are you a real contender for the Super Bowl? Can you win your conference? Puncher's chance. Could you win a playoff game? Could you wind up in the AFC or NFC title game, even if you face a prime contender and have no real chance, at least a very unlikely one, to win it? So the teams that we have here, Anthony, are Lions, Bills, Jags, Texans. Lions, Bills, Jags, Texans. Sorry, Rams also in there. I want to start there because I said last week, I was the one who was like, I'm putting the Rams up there. I like what they've done when Stafford's been in the lineup. I think they belong. And as long as they go to Baltimore and compete with Baltimore in Baltimore, that's good enough justification for me. And boy, do I feel justified.
No, you were absolutely right. I cast all doubt on the Rams going into Baltimore, competing. Definitely just thought Baltimore's defense was going to be able to rise to the occasion. But guess what? The Rams' offense also rose to the occasion. So I'm cool with leaving them there. It'll be interesting to see how they do the next couple of weeks. They do have a couple of divisional games coming up, I think. So, we shall see how the Rams look in those couple of games. But I'm fine with leaving them here as long as, their offense continues to do what they've been doing. Matthew Stafford as poised and experienced as they come.
Yeah, without a doubt. They've been there. They've done that. They've got the stars. They've got a formula that works.
Yep.
We'll preview, obviously, the Rams tomorrow a lot more. And Logan and I taped our Rams preview today, which is just a small part of our podcast. Normally the preview is like the entire pod, but given the circumstances of the season, we were like, what else do we want to do? So we had a really great conversation about Jamin Davis. And then we also had Matt Miller from ESPN on, who is phenomenal on draft stuff. But we did, in talking about the Rams, it was interesting because Logan's like, yeah, like they run it, but they're not actually that good at it, but they run it until they make you get into personnel that they really like, and then they throw it all over on you. And I was like, oh, you mean the thing that I've been advocating for here in Washington? Funny, interesting how that works. But they have a formula that works. They know who they are. They know what they want to do. They have a way of attacking you. And I think the Rams are a team that I would not want to see in the playoffs. Because Stafford also can go win you a game. Then you have the Bills, who I think are starting to rise a little bit again. Obviously, that big win over the Eagles. And then you got, I don't know what to do with the rest of this category. Like, the Bills remain the ultimate puncher's chance team because they have Josh Allen. And their win over the Eagles shows you that. They beat the Chiefs. Got a wacky play at the end, but they beat the Chiefs. And you're like, okay, well, you beat back-to-back Super Bowl participants. You beat back-to-back prime contenders. You're clearly in puncher's chance. And frankly, with another win, might wind up in prime contenders. I think that's probably worth mentioning too. But the Jags lose to Joe Flacco in Cleveland. The Texans get embarrassed by the Jets. And the Lions are all of a sudden borderline on a tailspin. What do we do with these teams?
It's a great question. The Texans situation, then they got one more week, Craig. I think they got one more week.
And Stroud, by the way, hasn't practiced the last 2 days. So they're at Tennessee.
Oh, divisional.
And then they've got Cleveland at Tennessee at Indy. So they're divisional for 3 of the final 4 and Cleveland in between. Like, they just lost 30-6 to the Jets, bro.
To the Jets.
I guess they still have won 4 of their last 6. They've earned another week. I will give them another week, but I'm real tempted to pop them down because they've also lost 2 of their last 3. They just were on a 3-game winning streak before that.
And the offense isn't looking good. Injuries are piling up offensively. That's what's been driving them all season. CJ might not play. He got knocked out of the game against the Jets. Davis Mills came in, didn't do too much.
I want to see how they perform. If they perform well, and even if they lose without Stroud, I'm okay with it, and we'd probably keep them. But I think by and large, we
They got to beat the Titans, Greg. They have to.
All right, there you go.
They got to beat the Titans.
Jags, I still feel like they belong here, but they're also a one more week and we bump you down team.
Yeah.
And the Lions kind of in that same boat. Like, are you finally downturning after a year of being great? Unfortunately, in the last half of last season and the first half of this one, or did you just have a down couple weeks and you're going to be fine? Can you stop going 1 for 5 on a 4th down and stop turning the ball over?
Yeah, I mean, again, like, those divisional games are just so weird, but you're right. I think we get one more week.
Well, and their one more week comes against the Denver Broncos, who I think we need to talk about here. Interesting, but not quite good enough. Denver, after we were ready to move them up, lost, and then bounced back with a big 24-7 win last week over the Chargers after a close loss to the Texans. I think Denver's got to get moved up. I can't believe I'm saying that. Because the Commanders beat them this year, bro. They beat them.
Yep. I mean, we just caught them at a good time, just like we caught the Cardinals at a perfect time. I think if we play the Cardinals week 4, week 3, I think we lose.
Yeah, it's not great.
I think we would have lost.
Not
but
great.
I'm with
Broncos up
the
to
Broncos.
puncher's chance.
I think if they beat the Lions, though. I think if they
I
go
kind
out
of
there
think
and
like
beat
that's
the
a
Lions.
game. I think they get to be moved back up.
Okay.
And that's a game where the loser goes down.
Yep. All right.
Okay.
That's
and if they play each other to like an overtime 31-30 type of game, they can both stay.
All right.
Because then they belong in the same neighborhood.
Yep.
All right. Anybody else needs to go up? Steelers? No.
No.
God, they are on the verge of getting in no chance, which is crazy because we put them in puncher's chance 2 weeks ago against my better judgment. Falcons?
Nope.
Seahawks?
Seahawks are an interesting team.
But they're not good enough. Like
No.
that's the name of the category.
Yeah.
Tampa?
Nope.
New Orleans?
Nope.
Chargers?
They need to move down.
Chargers need to go down to no chance with the Herbert injury.
Yeah.
Welcome to the basement.
No chance.
Welcome to the basement, Brandon Staley. New Orleans.
No.
Indy.
Nope.
Green Bay. So frustrating.
Yeah, I don't get Green Bay.
Minnesota's got quarterback issues.
Yeah.
Bengals.
I think the Bengals are a team that we should consider for next week. I think we keep them there.
I agree with that.
But next week.
Fool me once, okay. Fool me twice. What's going on, Jake Browning? Fool me 3 times. Maybe I am actually the fool.
Yeah.
And Jake Browning is going to lead them to an all right finish. And then the Browns.
Joe Flacco, he's looked good.
He has looked good. I think we need to give that one more week.
Yeah, one more week. One more week. All
right, and then Carolina, Arizona, the Giants. If Tommy DeVito keeps winning, do we have to move the Giants out of no chance?
Are they still mathematically in the playoffs? Oh, they're 5-8, right?
They're 5-8. They could finish.
Give it one
over
more week.
500.
Give it one more week.
Yeah,
That's where I am.
New England, Tennessee, yikes. Although nice win. Vegas, Jets, Commanders, all at the bottom. All right, that is our NFL tier. Those are our NFL tier rankings. When we get back, we dive deep into the comments section. Some very interesting comments from all over the DC sports universe, but many on the monumental move from DC to Virginia. We will get into the YouTube comments next on the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app. hour of the Hoffman Show here on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Mañana, we will be at Capital One Arena. Anthony, do you know if we're at District D or are we in the concourse tomorrow? I'm guessing we're at District D. I think they're having another block party with the new court and all that kind of stuff being celebrated, which I realize there's great irony in, if we're being honest, with the celebrating something so DC, something so district with the boundary stones and everything on the heels of the week's news. But I do believe that they're having another block party, and we'll be at Capital One tomorrow, and District D, I should say, tomorrow.
That I don't know.
Okay.
I wish I was going because I would know.
Yeah.
Maybe I would know.
Yeah. We're going to find a remote soon that you can come to. That's a priority for me.
It'll be greatly appreciated.
I don't know if it can necessarily be a high priority because I don't really actually have control over these things, but what'd I tell you? What's the remote that you should make sure you come on? Vegas, bro.
Oh, yeah.
See if you can get yourself out to Radio Row because I'm going to be there. I booked those flights for real.
I'm going to look into it.
So the boys are going to the chicanery that is Radio Row in Las Vegas coming up in a couple of months. Right now, speaking of chicanery, shenanigans, tomfoolery, it is time for Never Read the Comments.
We tried to warn them. They didn't listen.
Yeah!
Every week, the Hoffman Show goes into the belly of the beast.
We read those comments, baby.
Never read the comments.
All right, it is time to dive into the deepest, darkest part of the internet. That's right, the comments section, specifically my comments section. At Craig Hoffman on YouTube. We also check them at the Team 980. And we also have episodes of Take Command in full at 1067 The Fan. Obviously, the big topic that we posted a bunch of content from yesterday are our interviews around the Monumental Sports teams leaving for Potomac Yards, at least the framework of the deal in place, et cetera, et cetera. Rarely do we get a point so good from user XB6RN7QY2X that we have to actually read their username and use the comment, because normally those are user blah, 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 word vomit, letter number vomit. Those are typically where the worst comments come from. But no. We had a great comment from user XB6RN7QY2X talking about Ted Leonsis and his role in this, and kind of the title of the opening segment yesterday was, I don't care if Ted Leonsis got a good business deal. And user, you get it by now, said, this isn't even real capitalism. Ted was allowed the honor and privilege to own a multi-billion-dollar monopoly that is the Washington Wizards over professional basketball in the entire region that has a huge and authentic basketball culture at that. He doesn't have direct competitors and doesn't even have to put out a quality product. That's not real capitalism. If y'all, the people defending him online, are going to use that lame excuse, then let's allow another NBA team in DC and see how he reacts. And I think this is a great point. And I mentioned this earlier in the show, but I will mention it again here because it's been a few hours and most of you probably weren't listening at 4 o'clock. But professional sports isn't capitalism, the way in which we assign team ownership. And so this idea that, oh, they're the owners, they just get to make the money, to me falls so incredibly short. European sports, like specifically soccer, with their tiers and relegation and promotion and the ability for anybody to start a club and get involved, and if you climb the ladder, you climb the ladder, that is capitalism. That is cutthroat competition, baby. What you have in American pro sports is oligarchy. And to the extent there's competition, it's with other entertainment. It's with other, do I want to go to a movie tonight or do I want to watch the Wizards game? Do I want to watch the Wizards game on TV or do I want to watch The Voice? Do I want to go to the Wizards game or the Capitals game or go to a bowling alley or a movie theater? And there's other elements, of course. You can always spend your money somewhere else or your attention somewhere else. But even within pro sports, specific to the Capitals and the Wizards, they're not in competition with each other. They can't play the same night at home. They share an arena. And that is something that I think is another part of this that we're going to talk about in a little bit, is the idea, like part of the reason this is happening this way is because you've got two franchises with two very different fan bases and there's a ton of overlap, two different fan bases and two different kind of but two alternate sets of goals to win, to make money, to do all these things, but they're not related to each other, that are all of a sudden related because they're owned by the same person. Like, what's best for the Capitals may not be what's best for the Wizards, and what's best for the Wizards may not be what's best for the Capitals, and yet they are tied together. No, that's ridiculous. Signs of an oligarchy. A small amount of people have immense amounts of power. And I don't necessarily begrudge people owning multiple teams, but the more I think about it, the more I like the Stan Kroenke. Well, I guess Kroenke owns the Avs and the Nuggets, but let's call it the Josh Harris model. You own one team in DC, you own one team in Philadelphia, you own one team in New Jersey, you own one team in London. They operate independently and they do what's best for them. I think you owe it to the fans to have that and to be like, oh yeah, no, hey, it's Ted's teams. I agree with this commenter. You have the honor and the privilege of owning the teams. You should act in what's best for the teams, and that means what is best ultimately for the team's fans. And that is trying to put a winning product on the court and prioritizing that over your own financial gain. Doesn't mean you can't make money. It just means you should prioritize winning and making sure you serve the fans who have kept that franchise afloat to the point that you bought it. I think that's a totally fair and reasonable ask. And yet some people are like, the billionaire has a right to make more money. Whatever. David Herzing, 1496, with our dumbest comment of the week. Oh, look, this is on our chat with Andy Zimbalist, one of the leading economists who studies sports economies in the world. He goes, oh, look, Craig just happens to be friends with a leading economist. No agenda here. I would ask this question, Anthony. What agenda would I have? What are the possible agendas I have by having an economist on? Like, let's pretend I did have a quote unquote agenda. What agenda is accomplished by talking to an economist?
Are you yourself trying to become an economist?
No. Have you seen our show's history with math?
I don't know, Craig.
Like, I got a couple of these types of comments, and it's like, your agenda. And, like, if you want to call me a socialist because I view these teams as, like, things that belong to the people, and I'm not this pure, uncut, whatever, worship at the altar of the almighty dollar capitalist, then fine. Like, whatever. I'm perfectly, like, I laugh at those responses. And by the way, I just spent the first 5 minutes of this segment explaining why your capitalist example is stupid and wrong. But I do find it funny when you get accused of conspiracy theories that don't make sense, because there was also another comment we got about, are your overlords pushing this? And it's like, pushing what? I asked somebody smarter than me with more knowledge than me in a specific area questions. There is no agenda there. But now we all get to laugh at you and never read the comments. So that's cool. Chad K6996 says, I can't wait to go see the Red Wings smash he calls them the Craps. The Caps in an actual nice area/arena. I've hated going to Chinatown for games for years. The area is a total dumpster fire, and the surrounding area is void of anything nice. Oh, wait, there's a CVS across the street and some subpar bars. Okay, Chad. What exactly are you looking forward to in Alexandria right now? I know they're going to build a mini city, but you realize that right now what's in Alexandria is a dirt and a Target. And you're mad about subpar bars and a CVS? Huh? I'm not telling you that Chinatown, Gallery Place, Penn Quarters, my favorite area of DC. I'm not telling you that it's exactly thriving right now. But I have a lot more sympathy and empathy for that area and the changes it's undergone, like many business districts across America, because of a pandemic that changed the way that we live and work. And so instead of whining and complaining about it, like let's be intelligent about what it is. And Chad, there's plenty of amazing world-class restaurants in Penn Quarter. So I don't know why you're going to your subpar bars, but may I recommend to you Haleo by Jose Andres or Oyamel by Jose Andres, a world-renowned and world-class chef. Carmine's is a very well-known and respected Italian chain. Get your big giant family and go to Carmine's and have some pasta. There's a bunch of other like smaller fast casual type of places. Your Sweet Greens. When I was down there for jury duty the other day in the neighborhood, I went to the Bindas Bowl place for lunch. Bindas, a great Indian restaurant that has kind of a fast casual bowls restaurant style, like your Chipotle style restaurant down there. And while plenty have closed, a place like Bar Louie that has been replaced by District E, which they did a very great job of inside, like this Alexandria location is begging for a Bar Louie that was there forever. Penn Quarter Sports Bar. Like there's all kinds of stuff up and down the monetary scale, up and down the niceness scale, up and down the personality and the character scale, from suit and tie to bottom basement bar. And that's kind of the goal. And it works as long as there's people there. The problem is there's no more people there. And so that is what it is. Chad, have fun in Alexandria on whatever thing they build up from the ground and all its personality. Not that I'm anti-Alexandria. I love Alexandria. It's a very cool part of the DMV. But so is DC. And downtown's important. At GBRV8IM says, not good for Alexandria traffic that already stinks. Yesterday at this time, we talked to Adam Tuss about the transportation side of this, and he was awesome. One of the better interviews and more, I would say not even better, like one of the really more insightful interviews that we've had on something that is so incredibly relevant to all of our lives, getting around in a long time. Adam, of course, NBC4's transportation reporter, who talked about how this Potomac Yards station is like on the chopping block on Metro's side of it right now. Adam and others also reporting today that Metro wasn't remotely aware of, like no one at Metro was aware of that this announcement was coming at Potomac Yards yesterday. So meanwhile, they're going to all the jurisdictions and they're like, hey, we might need to shut down a bunch of Metro stations and slash this and cut that because we're in a $500 million hole, I think is the number. And they're like, yeah, this whole arena complex is going to work because the new Potomac Yard station that nobody goes to and isn't big enough to handle it. Seems like a flaw in the plan. I'd also mention this, and I saw some folks talking about this yesterday. Imagine, Anthony, actually, I'm going to bring you in here. It's 7 o'clock. The show ends. You have a flight out of town that you need to get to Reagan for. Right now, how long does that take you? You've done that a couple times recently.
Yeah, I have. It's taken me probably about 8 to 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Real smooth drive.
Imagine if all of a sudden you had Wizards or Capitals game traffic.
Yeah, I probably would have missed my flight.
Yeah.
I would be stressing, at least.
Yeah, you'd probably have to take off from work to make sure that you could get there on time. Or you'd have to take an alternate route. You'd take the green. You'd probably Metro, take the green line back up to L'Enfant, and then hop on a yellow train out to the airport.
Good gracious, that's a lot.
It is. And by the way, if you live in the city, I highly recommend taking the Metro to the airport. It's great, and you don't have to worry about parking, and that's a huge plus because parking at the airport is expensive and all that. But anyone who's at rush hour tried to get to the airport, it's terrible. Now imagine rush hour plus a freaking basketball or hockey game. That area is going to be a disaster. And I know that they've talked about, Monumental has like, oh, we're going to have to change some of the traffic patterns and we're committed to this and we're committed to helping build an expansion of this Metro line station. Like, I'd imagine also getting off a flight. Like, let's say Anthony, same question, right? You go to your game that you're working. Anthony's been doing some statistician work on the weekends for some game broadcasts and flying all over the country. and you come back on Sunday night and you're like, I'm going to Uber home. Oh, by the way, your Uber now has to fight game traffic, and so surge pricing. You're now looking at like, geez, for you to get back to prep, bro, it's like $150 Uber, easy.
Yeah, I'm looking at some pennies for sure. It's gonna be a lot of money.
You might as well just take that Metro to, ironically, to Gallery Place and hop on the red line there and skedaddle back on uptown.
Yeah. Good gracious.
It's not good.
No.
And so, like, these are, and you know, we deal with this with like the football team, obviously, with FedEx and whatever, and these are concerns around RFK, but it's different 10 times per year. If both teams are at this arena, that is 82 nights a year you're talking about this stuff. 82 nights a year that you have a conflict, at least. And if, God forbid, they're good and they go to the playoffs, you know, over 100 nights a year. Plus concerts, plus whatever else. You're talking about a very high frequency that not only residential areas in Alexandria have total bamboozlement of traffic, but one of the nation's busier airports also has this issue. And that conflict is one that I think needs to be considered by the state assembly, by the local folks in Alexandria, and something that I think everyone who uses DCA needs to think about. So just, you know, more food for thought. Not saying it should be a deal breaker, not saying that this is the end and whatever, but like it's something that needs to be figured out and dealt with sooner rather than later, because the more steps and complication of things that need to be built, whether it's additional highway, whether it's, you know, side roads that lead their special event only to the arena, whether it is, again, an expansion of this metro station that is currently not remotely built for this kind of volume, you need to get a move on it, because the construction is like the planning stage. You have like a year, and then you got 3 years to build it before the teams are going to be in there. Woo. Real quick, a couple Commanders comments here and never read the comments. On our video from Take Command talking about the potential next Commanders head coach, Scott Cooper 444 says, we need a coach who doesn't let his system get in the way of what's best for the personnel. Too many coaches try to bend players to their system instead of creating opportunities to showcase their strengths. There is a saying, and it's fresh on my mind because we recorded our fitness podcast, the Train with the Best podcast today. My buddy Chris Cortez and I, I've only been doing that for 8 years. But there's a phrase that Chris taught me that we apply a lot in the personal training and physical fitness world that I think applies to coaching in the football world as well, which is methods are many, principles are few. Methods don't always last. Principles always do. I think it's important to have principles. We would like to attack a defense this way because it puts them in conflict. And like there are big picture elements and philosophies of how you want to attack as a coach, how you want to scheme. And part of another principle is like, I would like to get my best players the ball. That would be a principle for me. How you go about doing that depends on the people. And you have to be able to customize it to who you have. Methods are many, principles are few. Methods don't always last. Principles always do. And I agree. And I think certain coaches do a really great job of that. Kyle Shanahan is the king of this. Other coaches, including I think Eric Bieniemy this year in Washington, not quite as much. And you see the difference, as well as obviously the people that Kyle is getting the ball to are much better football players than the people that Eric is trying to get the football to one way or another. Ox Spiff says, spot on about Ben Johnson, who I've said is my favorite, even despite the Lions' recent struggles. He's done a masterful job with Goff by maximizing the things he does well, and rather than simply copying concepts verbatim from what he executed in LA, Johnson builds upon them by installing concepts that best suits the Lions' personnel. A strong running game that sets up a passing game that is both diverse yet simple for the quarterback to execute is exactly what we need to set up Howell for success. I agree with that. Really hope they're able to snag Johnson. He checks all the boxes you guys mentioned, plus analytical mindset. He's apparently a math and computer science major that hopefully appeals to Josh Harris and a QB from North Carolina. There's footage of him working with Howell at the Senior Bowl. It's serendipity. I think there's a lot to like about Ben Johnson. I thought it was interesting today. I want to try to reach out to ESPN and see if we can get Bill Barnwell in. Barnwell ranked 10 jobs that he thinks will be open or potentially open this offseason. He had the Washington job 7th. I think that's way too low. I know I'm a little bit biased, but sheesh, that feels incredibly low. But I'd be curious to see what he thinks, and I'm guessing the roster is a part of that, but I got a lot of resources to fix this roster. That'll do for Never Read the Comments this week. If you would like to leave yours, you always can at Craig Hoffman or at the Team 980 on Take Command at 1067 The Fan as well. We got a brand new Take Command podcast coming out tomorrow morning with Matt Miller from ESPN, who had a very interesting take on the quarterbacks in this class versus how he'd evaluate them versus Sam Howell. Definitely do not want to miss that. Might play it for you tomorrow on the radio show as well. But make sure you're subscribed to Take Command and to 1067 The Fans YouTube page. And, of course, The Hoffman Show streams live all 3 hours every single day on the Team 980. When we get back here live on the Team 980, back to our top story, back to the Wizards and Capitals moving to Potomac Yards, and why I still wonder if both actually have to move. I'll explain next on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live on the free Odyssey app as well, and of course streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. Back to our top story, and I'm willing to take a call or two. Of course, you can ring us up, 301-230-0980 on the Ace Law listener line. If you're in a wreck, Ace Law helps you get a check. You call 8888 Ace Law, and they help you out, get that check. All is good. But I wanted to dive into a comment that was made on Grant and Danny yesterday by a guy who's going to join us tomorrow, Jim Van Stone. Ironically, Jim was supposed to join us yesterday, and the way it works out, I'll just be straightforward, like our phones crapped out for a second, and it was the exact window when we were supposed to talk to Jim. And I'm kind of like, I'm not happy about that, but I am glad that our interviews got spaced out between Grant and Danny and I, and I got to give credit to those guys. They did a great job yesterday with this interview and the stuff that they've been doing, and Grant's been very nice in sending me text messages about some of the stuff that we've been doing. So the good news is all of it is available on demand on the free Odyssey app, because you can't listen to both of us at once. But Jim Van Stone, who's the COO of Monumental Sports, and again, we'll be able to talk to him tomorrow, and I can, because I've now heard their interview, you can follow up on some of the very specific things that he said, talked about how Capital One Arena is not being left behind in his view, in Monumental's view. They're going to obviously take the Caps and Wizards and move them to Virginia in a new state-of-the-art arena, and then they're going to reshape Capital One Arena to make it a better place for the Mystics to play. They anticipate Georgetown basketball staying, and there's a lot of concerts and events that they currently cannot do because the commitments they have to the Capitals and Wizards, that they believe they can fill those 82 nights a year, maybe and then some, with concerts they have to turn down. Jim talked about the convention center being right up the street and how he thinks that they can combo on events that are happening at the convention center and like these big speeches that happen where you need a room for 10,000 people and a convention that's attached to it, where all the events are happening. And now you can host that in conjunction, Capital One Arena and the convention center, separated by a few blocks on foot and, of course, just one metro stop. But because of something he said in his answer, I would actually wonder, and we'll ask Jim Van Stone tomorrow, if both teams have to move in the first place. First, his answer on kind of the future of Capital One Arena.
You know, one of the things that we have with being one of the busiest buildings in the country is we have a lot of dates that we don't have flexibility. The other piece is the concert business and the family show business is doing really, really well. And we want to open up more opportunities to bring that to the greater Washington region. And, you know, I'll be honest with you, we miss out on shows that, you know, we would love to get based on the availability of the facility in the arena. So if we've got another venue here, you know, that affords a lot more opportunities from that standpoint. So, you know, Grant, we think the money to make it work, you know, based on your comments is there. And I think a lot of it could be just rethinking and repurposing, you know, what we're doing today. And, you know, to have two major buildings in this marketplace that this market deserves, you know, I think it's really a can't miss opportunity in terms of every single event that's coming out there. So, you know, we believe there's a huge opportunity. I mean, we've had, you know, events where we'd love to host NCAA championships here, but we just didn't have the flexibility to do it. And one of the things that I think personally could be really great is, as you know, the convention center in D.C. is only blocks away from here. Why can't this be an auxiliary location for us to partner, you know, really more broadly with the convention center to bring some of those major conferences in here that would love to have a building and flexibility of 10,000 plus, but, you know, we just can't do it because, you know, we've got other tenants in the building at that point in time. So, you know, we do think there is a market to make this work. And, you know, I think we're going to really put our, you know, focus on that balance along with, you know, building out the vision of the new campus that we have in Virginia.
So if that's the case, if the case is this city is big enough for two buildings, which it should be, right? I mean, New York has at least two, plus like monster theater, a monster theater scene and outdoor venues. Same with LA. LA now has two buildings, you know, with the Clippers' new building opening shortly, but they've had the Forum that they still use for concerts and stuff. It's not what it was in the 80s, obviously. but Staples or whatever the hell it's called, Crypto.com Arena. Now, Chicago's got one main one, but they've got a ton of things, and not that DC doesn't. DC has Lincoln Theater and Howard Theater, and obviously the Kennedy Center's a monster, both in prestige, but also in size. It can fill a ton of people. And so you've got these concert venues and things all over town and all over the region. Jiffy Lube Live out in Virginia. There's similar things in Maryland, etc. Point is, if the calculation for Monumental is this city's big enough for two buildings, then why can't we treat the Caps and the Wizards as two separate teams? Because the only reason you move both is because they're owned by the same guy and you want them both in the same building. But realistically, as we've talked about, the Wizards, who play a sport that is more popular in the urban area, that culturally belongs in the city, that fan base-wise is more tied to the city and more tied to Maryland. It's a long history from Baltimore to Landover on down. I realize the Capitals also played in Landover for a time. But all of those things, all of the reasons why people in D.C. and Maryland are specifically upset about the Wizards today, why can't you just refurbish Capital One Arena, since you're going to anyway, and have the Wizards stay at Capital One for games? That doesn't mean the thing that they want in terms of a practice facility can't be in the suburbs. And I think this is an important distinction, because a practice facility should be maximized for the players. It has nothing to do with the fans, right? You don't revitalize an area, a neighborhood around a practice facility because nobody goes to practice. You're not going to lunch and then going to practice as a regular fan of the team. You go to dinner and the game, or lunch and the game if it's an afternoon tilt on a weekend. Or maybe you go to the game and dinner after. But if Capital One's going to stay as a basketball arena, and unless you're going to downsize it so much or unflex it, because it sounds like they're going to make it flexible where it can be $10,000 for the Mystics or it can be $20,000 for an NCAA championship, because you can't make it a 10,000 seat arena permanently and expect the NCAA to bring anything other than nothing to you, just straight up. Like, you're not getting even a first round game or a conference tournament at 10,000 seats. At 20, now you're a real arena like the rest of the country, and you're fine. So if you're going to have to keep a 20,000 seat basketball arena anyway, why not take 41 nights a year off the calendar of the Capitals and move them to Virginia, build your campus, build Monumental Sports Network, build Monumental Sports Entertainment's global headquarters, build your esports, build all the things that you want that would be better with more space. And that's a part of this that I'm fully willing to admit, and admitted yesterday, and have admitted all day today. Like, there's parts of this that are undeniably better for the purposes. But the purpose of the games is to win them and for people to show up to watch them. And the people that are going to more show up for Wizards games are better suited to go to Capital One Arena than they are this new Potomac Yards site. And so why not just keep the Wizards here? And then there's so much benefit to this, and I'm sure Jim Van Stone can talk to me about why it doesn't make sense tomorrow, and he knows the numbers far better than I do because that's his job. But it would allow the Caps and the Wizards to play at home on the same night, something that currently can't happen. So there's more flexibility within the NBA and the NHL scheduling. And obviously, they know how to handle that. At the Staples Center right now, before the Clippers move into their new building next year, you have the Clippers, the Lakers, two NBA teams, and the Kings, an NHL team, all playing at once. So, like, these things can be worked around, but it's easier. And if you want to be flexible with events coming in and having alternate place to play or concerts or whatever, like, it's less crowded at the new place. So you could have, like, you could double dip more often, is basically what I'm saying. Is instead of the Capitals here or the Capitals there and the Wizards here, as I sit in D.C. doing the show, you could have them playing on the same night. You could have one of them plus a concert, which I guess could happen at the old place, but you're never going to have the idea of them playing on the same night and the flexibility that brings as the main tenants of the building. And so I think for logistical reasons it could work. I think for cultural reasons it could work. I think your commitment to downtown, if you're serious about wanting to be a part of the solution of revitalizing downtown DC, I think that helps your case there. And I don't know how much of a monetary loss it is. And you get to get the practice facility and all that stuff that you want at Potomac Yards. And the idea of practicing and playing at different places is something, one, that you're doing already with ESA and Capital One Arena, and is common for basically every team in every sport. Most teams now have a separate practice facility. Look at Ashburn and FedEx Field. Some teams in the NFL have started to kind of do the combo thing. There are a couple of teams around the NBA and the NHL that practice at their main arena, but mostly, especially in those two sports, your practice facility and your game facility are different. So that's not a problem at all. And I just think if the announcement yesterday morning had been, we are moving the Washington Capitals to Virginia. It's a better fit for our fan base who is more Virginia-based. We want to have something to anchor this new gigantic entertainment district that we're going to create. And we think the Capitals can do that on top of a world-class concert venue, a world-class entertainment venue, all the stuff. And maybe the Wizards play there on occasion. Like, I don't figure out the logistics, the details later. But the Wizards belong in D.C. because they are hashtag for the district. They belong within the boundary stones. Then I think the vitriol that came out of yesterday's announcement from two of the three corners of the DMV would have been almost entirely mitigated. One more PS on this, just real quick. Not really, I mean, of course it's related, but not fully related to what I was just saying. The idea that we talk about all of Northern Virginia together is also something that is very silly. As someone who used to live in Reston, and that 267 corridor, I would much rather go to D.C. from there than I would to Alexandria. Getting to Alexandria is a disaster from other parts of Northern Virginia. Is it more convenient if you live on 95 South? Yes, because you get off the highway sooner that you would then turn into 395 and take into D.C. Sure. So there is, I'm not saying that there aren't parts of Northern Virginia that will be better served by this location. Obviously, if you're in Alexandria and you don't have to leave, that's amazing. But if you live in Tysons, Reston, Herndon, Ashburn, Sterling, I would say probably the same for most of the I-66 corridor as well. Nevertheless, folks in Maryland, like this is actually worse to get to than in the district. Because whether you drove to like an East Falls church and hopped on the metro, or you drove all the way into the city and used one of the many parking garages around, like you didn't have to deal with Route 1. You didn't have to deal with the Beltway. You didn't have to deal potentially with the Woodrow Wilson Bridge. Like you didn't have to deal with all that stuff. And I do think it's kind of hilarious that like we just lump Northern Virginia together. As someone who has lived in Northern Virginia, I now live in D.C., but lived there for the better part of 7 years. Like, I always thought of there's kind of two Northern Virginias, which I know is like probably stunning to some people, but it really always to me felt like two different Northern Virginias. That there was the I-66 and 267 corridors, and then there was the 395 corridor that once you had to cross the Beltway and get through that mess and kind of cross over Tyson's Corner, you were talking about a different part of the region in a way that we just kind of lumped together for most of this conversation. Some of you will probably tweet me and tell me that I'm wrong. It's fine. Some of you don't even care at all because you live in Maryland and this all sucks to now think about getting to Alexandria. But that is what it is. Just a floating thought that I've had in the back of my head that floated to the front as we wrap up the show. We fully wrap up the show. Real things, real people said into real microphones next. the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. You missed any of the show today, very much worth going back and checking it out at the Team 980 on YouTube. You can rewind. Team 980, of course, on the free Odyssey app. You can rewind, and we will start putting up the highlights on demand. In fact, on the audio side, if you just search your favorite podcast app for the Hoffman Show, Anthony's already got a bunch of it up. At least I presume. That's typically how that works. You're not behind. I didn't just lie to the people.
I'm all the way caught up.
Well, like most of the show is up. There's not nothing up.
Oh, yeah. Majority of the show is up. I'm going to put up your last segment right now, and then, yeah.
It turned into a sneaky good segment.
It was a great segment.
Just, sometimes I wonder things aloud.
Yeah.
And then sometimes people are like, no, that's actually a terrible idea. And I'm like, okay. I'm open to new information. I'm excited to talk to Jim tomorrow morning. So Jim Van Stone, we're taping tomorrow morning, full transparency. So we'll have that interview for you tomorrow. Anthony, do we want to slate? Let's see. Tomorrow's a Friday, a football Friday, powered by your local Honda dealer. What do we do on Fridays? Why do I feel like I haven't been in on a Friday? I was here last Friday.
We do Around the NFL.
We do Around the NFL at 5:30.
Take Command.
Oh, last week was a bye week. That's why last Friday was.
Oh, yep.
Yeah, we definitely will have some Take Command. We'll definitely go around the NFL. I think we'll probably have more coverage of this story as well. So, Jim Van Stone. I'm going to say either 4. We do our pick 6 at 6, so that means Jim will be at 4:30. So there we go. That's how we do the rundown on the fly here. Anything else that we should mention from a housekeeping note, Anthony?
I don't think so. I think we've covered all bases.
Excellent. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to mention. No, anything on my phone that sometimes I pull stuff up as a reminder. Nope. All right. That means we got time for real things. Many real things. That real people said into real microphones.
Real things.
We're not going to be sucked this year.
Real people.
5 and 11. Not very good.
Said into real microphones.
The culture is actually damn good.
You cheated, Craig.
I did cheat a little bit. I knew what time the show ended because it says it on the board.
Yes.
We did that every day. You know what's also funny? So if you listen to the end of the show with frequency, because I occasionally spill the behind-the-scenes secrets, and of course those that are watching on YouTube see this happen every day. Anthony gives me a secret hand signal that is telling me what time I need the show to end because we have a hard out. A hard out in the radio business means like your mic cuts off, you stop talking at that time. Like on a network, like I remember when I interned at ESPN, like ESPN radio, it was preset. So like if you kept talking past the hard out, nobody would hear you. We could just screw it up. And it's not really a hard out. Like the mic doesn't shut off and the system doesn't take over on its own. But I would like to be out at the time that Anthony gives me so we smoothly transition over to the network at 7 o'clock. In this case, the Maryland Sports Network, right? With Talking Terps tonight?
We actually have BetMGM.
Oh, BetMGM? There's no Talking Terps tonight?
No.
Oh, okay. BetMGM tonight is coming up after us. So we want to like smoothly transition into that. And the reason we use a hand signal is because the way we used to run our YouTube stream, if Anthony used the talkback feature in my headphones, it would go over the stream. That's not true anymore. We have a separate audio feed, but the hand signal has stayed, which I appreciate. There was no signal given to 49ers punter Steve Wishnowski on Sunday when he ran a fake punt in the 49ers' latest demolition of another NFL team. He just apparently saw it happen and took off. And then he talked about it.
Called play, or did you wing it on that play?
And Wisnowski had to take it. He might get it. Wisnowski's going to run for the first down and more.
Winged it. So you just spotted that it was open and you took off?
Sort of the whole rush team had sort of crushed down on the protection and it was open, so yeah, just ran.
Is that one of the things on the sideline where Cal says, no, oh, yes.
I don't really know what happened, but it was a good one.
I love it. Also, he's an Aussie. Hey, mate, I don't know. The snap was a little bit to my right, and I saw the blockers crash down, and I just took off running.
That is an insane play because if you don't pick that play up,
then the couch just kills you.
Brutal.
Scary. Scarier than some of the animals down there in Australia. All right, that's our radio show. Now I'm turning into like an old-timey British broadcaster. We're done. I'll see you tomorrow at Capital One Arena.